Okay, so how is everybody doing tonight? Doing well, I hope. And I did ask for everybody to mute their mics, but please feel free to unmute at any point if you want to comment or ask questions as we go. You can also use the chat area because I do try to keep my eye on that as well. But you do not have to remain silent the whole time. All right, so this is our first week of Aesthetics and Theory of Communication. And this course is a little bit unique because this is one of the few classes that the online and campus students are in together. So you might see some unfamiliar names on the roster, and those are probably students from the other program. So we have a campus version and an online version, and you're all here together. For those of you who are campus students, this might be your first online class, and I know it's not everyone's favorite format, but if it is causing you trouble, be sure to get in touch and let me know, and we can work through any of the stumbling blocks that you might run into. All right, so before I dive into the class, is there any kind of questions, quick questions or concerns that I can address before we get started? I know I'll be explaining a lot more about the class itself and the assignments, but any general concerns? And I suppose I could introduce myself. I'm Lisa Smith, and I will be your course director this month. I have a pretty varied background in a combination of visual art and psychology, and I worked as an instructional designer for quite a few years, doing e-learning for corporate and government clients. So I've done some odd and interesting jobs in my past. Worked with the U.S. military quite a bit, and then came to Full Sail to teach educational media, and then moved over to the media communications program once that started up. And looking forward to be working with you this month. So this class, in reflection videos, I hear a lot of comments about with students saying they don't really know what to expect with this course, what it's going to actually be all about. And that's understandable because the word aesthetics is used in a lot of different contexts and a lot of different meanings. What are some of the things that come to mind for you guys when you hear that word aesthetics? What is it? How would you define that? Okay, Kenneth says art, beauty. And sometimes it's used to simply mean a particular style or look, like like a Southwestern aesthetic. But as Kenneth says, the origins are actually from a branch of philosophy that deals with art, and it is the study of what makes something beautiful. Why do some people appreciate something as beautiful while others might not find it? So, like the paintings I have up here on the slide, one is by Jackson Pollock on the left, and it's very abstract to an extreme, and then the one on the right is by Claude Monet, and it's much more easily appreciable and easily accessible to the viewer. We know that's a landscape. It's very colorful and attractive. So this started out as the study of what factors played a part in determining what was considered beautiful and why people react to things differently. But as you see, there's a lot of flexibility there. There's a lot of subjective value involved in deciding what someone finds appealing, because some people might look at the Jackson Pollock painting and wonder why, why it looks like something you might see on an artist's floor where paint is dripped. But others consider that a great piece of art. Jackson Pollock is considered, a great artist. So in our world, as media strategists and media professionals, we need something a little more manageable, something that's a little more predictable, and that would allow us to, because we're going to be creating media that's communicating a message, and we won't want to leave anything to chance. And that's something I'll say again and again throughout the course, is nothing's left to chance. We need to know how our audience will respond to a particular piece of media and receive the message that we're hoping to convey. So we come to a little bit more modern definition of aesthetics, and that's applied media aesthetics. And this is a process in which we examine a number of media elements and how they interact and our perceptual reactions to them. And so that underlined section there, perceptual reactions, is the key, because it's not any longer dealing strictly with beauty, because beauty is a very positive reaction, right? But perceptual reactions, that's wide open. That could be very positive, very negative, or apathetic. So, it might be our purpose to evoke negative reactions. Think about a lot of public service announcements or the ASPCA commercials with, Sarah McLachlan singing with the sad animals. That's not meant to evoke a positive perceptual reaction. It's supposed to tug at our heartstrings and make us feel sad and feel empathy for these poor animals. So this applied media aesthetics is the process where we will study how different pieces of media combine to evoke specific reactions, whether they're positive or negative. There's a lot of different aspects that we could dive into with this. I'm going backwards a little bit. When we talk about media elements, what I mean by media elements is the fundamental building blocks of media. So it would be the images that you choose, whether they're still imagery or moving pictures in digital video. That's going to play a part in your audience's response. The way you capture those images, whether they're close up or medium shots or wide shots, will affect how the response is. Color is another factor, and the overall style, as well as once you get into richer media, then you're dealing with audio and soundtracks and so forth. So there's tons of different possible media elements. For a purpose this month, we're going to keep things somewhat compact. We're going to deal with visual media specifically. So not getting into audio at this point. You will get into that later in the program. But for right now, we're dealing with visual media, and we're going to stick to 2D still imagery for now. And this is really meant to set a baseline or set a foundation. And these factors that we'll deal with this month will apply in nearly any medium that you work with. So if you're dealing with video, then these same ideas will apply, or audio, or web design or graphic design. You'll look and see that these factors still apply, just in very unique ways. And then once you get into digital video and digital audio editing courses, then you'll start adding those media elements into the mix. So this is a breakdown, and this is kind of a crazy diagram, but this is a breakdown of the course, what we're doing this month, week by week. And I've arranged this vertically, so if you could kind of see, we have three major topics, and those are the explorations each week. Starting off with visual storytelling, and that's a continuation of the storytelling ideas that you got in New Media Tools. In week 2, then we add in the elements of color theory, and color psychology. Week 3 is visual style, and that's typography. So typography in the sense of the look of the typefaces or the fonts, not getting into kerning and leading or letting and all those technical aspects of typography, but looking at just visual style and also visual hierarchy, and that is the way in which you manage your viewer's experience, telling them where to look first, what should grab their attention first, and then second, and so on, so that it creates a planned experience. So starting off in visual storytelling, and that's we're going to talk about how you choose your imagery, how do you make meaning for your viewer and get their attention through storytelling. And then each week there's going to be a Photoshop practice. So we're going to ease into Photoshop with some basic techniques. They're going to be covered in a Linda lesson, and I will try to support those as well here in the go-tos. And each Photoshop practice corresponds to the ideas that we're covering in the exploration. So in this week's Photoshop practice, you're simply learning basic techniques like cropping and rotating an image, but also adding text. And so you're going to create a basic visual story. And then each week you will create a part of a mood board project. And I'll get into the specifics of what the mood board is in a minute. That's going to be your major project for the month. Please excuse my sniffling. I'm having some trouble with allergies this week, so apologize for that. Yeah, okay. And Kenneth says it's exciting stuff, and hopefully it will be the case. I try to make it fun, but it's still taking it seriously, but getting to dive into some interesting stuff. I, I I hesitate to call this a design class. I know that it's often viewed as sort of a graphic design class, and there's a lot of overlap there, but it's sort of a general media understanding. If I have a key takeaway that I would hope for you to gain by the end of the month is simply a critical eye, so that you're looking at commercials, or you're looking at billboards, or print ads in magazines, and reverse engineering them in your head, kind of taking them apart and asking, okay, well, why did they shade it that way? Why did they use these colors and this particular arrangement? Why is the author on this book cover emphasized over the title, and so forth? So asking a lot of questions, but you'll also get some experience creating as well. So week 2, Photoshop practice again. You'll learn some basic color manipulations. So photo manipulations, changing colors in a photograph. Week 3 is more complex photo manipulation, adding and removing elements from a photo. So compositing images. And this is all going to come together in week 4 with the synthesis project. And that's what's going to happen there is, through your mood board, you're going to be planning a design project. So it's sort of brainstorming a design project piece by piece. And then in week 4, all those plans are going to come together through your Photoshop skills to create an original piece of media. It's going to be an advertisement design or a poster design, your choice, that kind of brings all this information together. Any questions on that so far? Okay, great. Have either of you heard of a mood board or ever used a mood board before? Okay, Ken has used or has heard of a mood board at least. Could you tell us a little bit about what a mood board is, just in your own words? Okay, so you've done some Googling. Good. That's good to kind of look into it, look ahead. A mood board is essentially a brainstorming tool. I believe they started off being used primarily by interior designers, where they would collect images of say color swatches or fabrics or pieces of furniture that appealed to them, and they would collect these together to kind of create a composition. They would plan the interior of a room this way by collecting these images, and they're strictly design ideas. Um, this is just drawing inspirations. And then this was adopted by graphic designers who began collecting inspirations, say, and this is an example. This is actually an example I found on the internet of a simple mood board. And you see that this graphic artist has collected existing pieces of media of a particular style that is along the lines of what they have in mind for a project they're working on. They've collected all these past examples, and this looks very retro, kind of 1960s era graphic design. So that's sort of the look that they're going for. And they've included a sample color palette and even some typefaces over here. And this happens to be the factors that we're going to work with this month. So this works as a great example. A lot of times the mood boards are created, they can be created using almost anything. Some people use Pinterest to pin images. Online tools like Google Slides or Google Drawings are good, because what that allows is for you to share that with your teammates or with your clients. So if you're creating media for a client, you can show them your ideas and get their buy-in, or get their input so that you can make changes early on and not spend a lot of extra time and money working on something that is not in line with their vision or their needs. Yes, and to your comment, Ken, this is very much like storyboarding. It's another technique for pre-planning media. This could actually be would probably precede a storyboard. So you would come up with these ideas first, then move into storyboarding, and then move into production, so that when you get into the production stage, you're ready to go. You have a roadmap to follow, and there's not a lot of guesswork left. What we're going to use this month, just for purpose of this course, is a Pages template. So it's for the Pages software that I'm providing, and you're going to create your mood board in stages. So each time we cover a particular topic, you'll complete that part of the mood board and turn it back into me. I'll give my feedback and allow you to make changes and adjustments. So I'm kind of playing the part of the client in this case, giving my feedback to you as the designer. Here's an example of one that we're going to do. This is actually a past student's project. And so on the left-hand side, you see they've given their design idea, just kind of a synopsis of their concept, the kind of emotion and perceptual reactions they want to evoke, and the overall imagery that they're going to include, and the feeling that they want to inspire. So they're really going for a sense of authenticity, fearlessness, and experience, caring for the stories of others. Those are the themes. And then there's a image collage, and it's just a collection of images that are in line with their vision for what they're going to create. Your storyboard or your mood board project is going to be based on your mission statement that you created, that you wrote back in, probably in Introduction to Media Communications, although possibly in Portfolio Project 1, depending on which track you're on. So what the idea here is that you're taking that written mission statement and creating a visual representation of it. Say if your mission statement was a movie, how would you make a movie poster to represent it? Or an advertisement? Those are sort of the two main options. How would you communicate that? Using imagery, a combination of imagery and words, but letting the imagery do a lot of the talking. And that's what this student has done here. She's given her concept. This kind of is not just a restatement of the mission statement, but starts to explore some ways of visualizing that. And she's included imagery. And for your mood board, you'll include at least 10 images. And the way you organize those is up to you, but I really like to see some form of organization to see where your thought processes are. In this case, she's grouped them by categories like textures, concept illustration, so just sort of capturing the kind of imagery she wants, typefaces, which will be a topic in itself, but she's already thinking about that at this point, and including layout and color. And also these little yellow boxes, this is a screenshot, so it doesn't work, but those boxes are actually comments that she's added, indicating what her thought process in selecting each of these images. And that's something I would encourage you to do as well. Comments are great both for your own purpose of keeping a record of your thought process, but also communicating if you're dealing with a client like I'm representing in this case, or a team of professionals. You want to make sure that you're all on the same page, so you can include those comments to it's sort of, I don't know if either of you have done any programming or coding, like for the web, you include comments so anybody else that comes along knows what you're doing at that point, and that's the same idea. You want them to know what you're thinking, including each of these elements. So this is the week 1 part of the project. In week 2, you'll continue developing the mood board and you'll create your color palette. And this is drawing on the color theory and color psychology topics that we'll be covering that week, and then giving your rationale for selecting those colors. And so you're doing this all in the same document, and you're giving it to me through FSO. I'm giving it back to you with my comments, and you have an opportunity to make changes. And when you turn it back in, say if you turn in the week 1 project, I give my feedback. If you turn that in week 2 with the new section completed, I look back at week 1, and if you've made corrections, I will actually go back and revisit your grade. So you have a chance to earn back some of the points that might have been deducted if that was the case. My feeling is that my approach to grading, at least, especially with these projects, is that it shouldn't be a one-time judgment, that learning is a process. And so if you've learned from errors and made corrections, then I will give credit for that. So that's my outlook on it. So that applies each week. And then in week 3, you pick typefaces. So we'll get into specifics later, but you'll pick 2 or 3 typefaces. One is more stylized and has more personality for headings or titles, and then a more readable typeface for copy content, and sometimes really highly stylized typefaces for branding purposes. And notice what we're doing also in the process. This is your mission statement being visualized, and you're picking color palettes and typefaces. You're actually creating your personal brand in the process of creating the mood board. So this is something that's not only good for this month's project, but something you could carry forward. If you're happy with how this turned out, this could be your branding as a media professional. And then down the road in graphic design for communications, you can actually use this to create your business cards and stationery and stuff like that. So this is where this is all headed. This is that synthesis assignment at the very end in week 4. If you look at this image, this is her final design. She's taken all those factors and incorporated them. You see the color palette that she selected, and if we go back, you can see that. The kind of burgundy color, the deep blue, and the kind of periwinkle blue, and there's a bit of an off-white or gray. Most of those are represented here. The navy blue in the middle and the burgundy. And this, I believe that's that off-white color as well. As well as the imagery, you see that wood texture, the standing on the ledge theme, and so forth. And those factors are each identified by name: embrace authenticity, live fearlessly, love without limits. So all of those factors came together really nicely in this final project, and that's what we're doing. So we're taking it very slowly, very methodically, more methodically than you probably would in practice, but it's for learning purposes. Is that all good? Excellent. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch the Linda lesson on visual storytelling, and that's kind of the lecture portion of the course. I mean, I could get in here and lecture, and I do, but I try not to have you here listening to the same material repeated. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. But looking at your exploration, and I've looked at most of the exploration assignments and given feedback so far. There's a handful that I have yet to get to, but I'll get your feedback on those really soon. But I like to pull out some of the ads that you pick in those explorations and show them here and kind of discuss those a bit. This was not one of the exploration examples, but this is sort of a quick illustration of what visual storytelling is. And it is, as the name implies, telling a story through imagery, through visual media. If we just had this photograph of this natural cavern, it would be a pretty interesting looking photo and pretty incredible natural formations, but there wouldn't really be a story there. It would just be a nature photo. But by adding this simple little piece of text, here I come, ready or not, now there's a story. Our brains start thinking, what's happening here? There's a game of hide and seek taking place in this massive cavern. Not only that, but we're in the cavern, because this is from our perspective, so we're taking part in this game. We've been pulled into the story. We don't have a lot of detail. We don't know who that is out there that's about to come seeking, or even where this cavern is. But we know there are events taking place. So that's the very basic visual story, is that interaction of words and imagery. In the Linda lesson, and this is sort of a pop quiz, but what were the 2 fundamental elements that you need in order to have a story? And I'm not really quizzing you. This is simply review. Okay, Kenneth says a problem and And there's the answer. So the two basic essential elements are you need a protagonist, so someone who is experiencing the story, and a story problem or a challenge, something that the protagonist is facing or experiencing. So you can have an image that's not a story. That's exactly what we had back here. If, the basic photo is a visually impressive image, but there's not a story. By adding these elements in, then you build a story. So if you have an actor, someone who's taking action, and something that they're dealing with, then you start to get more of a story element. Here's an example. Who's the protagonist? And the protagonist is the golfer. And the story problem is that the golfer is losing his pants, right? So pretty simple story, but there's certainly a story happening there. It's a very embarrassing situation, and you don't want to find yourself facing that. And their slogan is, "Our mission is to keep your pants up," with E-belt. And this is actually looking ahead at visual hierarchy. We really don't notice that little slogan and logo until after the fact, right? First, we notice this crazy situation happening, and that's the story that's taking place. And even the look on his face as he realizes something's gone horribly wrong here. So the very basics: protagonist, story problem. This is one that one of you did choose for the exploration, possibly more than one of you. What is the story problem here? Right, the kid is drawing on the wall. Not only is the kid drawing on the wall, they've basically reproduced the Vincent van Gogh painting with their crayons. So they've done something ordinarily that's terrible, defaced this wall in the house, but at the same time they've done something so incredibly impressive. So the story problem then is, what do you do? Do you punish them, or do you reward them with these chocolate treats? Who's the protagonist, though? Is it the child? Okay, right, yeah, the mom or the adult, but we don't see them, right? In fact, we are put in their place, in their position. And the question, the kind of rhetorical question that's posed, is directed to us. So we're kind of put in the role of the protagonist. And that's something you'll see sometimes, is putting the viewer in the role of the protagonist. So that you won't always see the protagonist. Sometimes you are the protagonist. And that's a good technique for getting your viewers involved. If you can pose that kind of challenge to them, you're not that, you're not looking at a golfer losing his pants. You're in the story now. And we're kind of naturally drawn into those kind of mental challenges, right? If yeah, this needs to be framed, right? You kind of cut that piece of drywall out, but we're naturally inclined to respond to those kind of mental challenges or questions posed to us, and it results in more engagement, where naturally we want to find a solution. So that rhetorical question is an easy technique to use in your visual stories to help engage your audience. That idea of using our natural inclinations is actually a really powerful tool. If you think about instinctive responses. How do we are naturally very social creatures, human beings. We feel empathy for others. We respond to the expressions, the emotions that are expressed around us. Think about, there's a phenomenon called pareidolia, and that's a fancy word. It just means we see faces in things like clouds and toast and wood grains and so forth. We're naturally inclined to recognize faces. And part of that is survival, but also part of that is our social nature, our empathy. Think about newborn babies imitate the facial expressions of the adults, of their mother and their father and those other adults around them. That's how they learn to communicate feelings. And we don't lose that as adults. It just becomes internalized. We don't go around imitating people's faces, at least not to the same extent. But we recognize it and we feel those feelings that are expressed to us. So using emotion in your imagery is an effective way to really hook a viewer, like this very stalwart little doggy here. You look at the slogan, he may be small, but you should see his heart and this look in his eye, and that pouty lip. This isn't even, a human. We don't even know if the emotions we're reading on this face are actually what's going on inside this little dog's head, but we humanize, we anthropomorphize and read that in. And I wouldn't be surprised if this picture hadn't been photoshopped to make this expression look more human. And he's so cute, right? And that's the emotion that they are going for. Because we see those little watery eyes and we feel so sad for this little dog. And he's in prison. Look, that's not even a dog pound. That's a human jail. And so you see how they're using our natural sense of empathy to really drive home that message and create that perceptual response. That exact perceptual response that you had, Kenneth. He's so cute. And the message is about shelter dogs and, encouraging you to adopt shelter dogs rather than buying from the stores. So very simple story. Not a lot of, not a lot going on in this picture, but that's all you need is that face, that symbol of the bars, and that slogan. And it's evoking that perceptual reaction. Okay, so that's the basics. And just jump in if there are any questions. You don't have to wait for the question slides, but if there are any, go ahead and shoot them out there. Okay, so going beyond the basic elements of a story, what were some of the techniques that the Linda lesson described for engaging your audience, or really kind of drawing your audience into the story? And these were directly from your exploration activity as well. Okay, a good story. And that's true, you do need a good story. There were some specific techniques that were identified. Okay, and sort of as a umbrella term, these all kind of fit under the idea of intellectual challenge. And they were things like an element of surprise. Yeah, the challenge to overcome. Not only a challenge to overcome, but a challenge for the audience. Just sometimes you see these things that are sort of visual puzzles or things that you have to look at for a minute to get that aha moment when you realize what's going on. So there's elements of surprise. Use of humor is always good for really pulling in an audience. And you see that now with a lot of viral marketing. Almost always uses absurd humor to make you want to share that video. Sometimes it uses kittens, but with the Dollar Shave Club example, they use that just completely off-the-wall slapstick humor. Poignancy, and there's our little puppy on the last slide, pulling at the heartstrings. Suspense, making us wonder what's going to happen next. And also symbolism and visual metaphor, which are very similar. It's like we saw with the bars in the background of the dog, or something that represents something else that in either our culture or or universally represents an idea. Here we go. This was one of my favorites from the exploration. Not that I don't try to call favorites, but I really enjoyed this example because of the juxtaposition. And this is that element of surprise and also the use of humor. There's this very scary set of jaws on the left, and then when we pull back, it's this tiny little, is that a Pomeranian puppy that really isn't going to frighten very many people. Remember, I mentioned earlier the use of camera angles to communicate your story, and this is an example of that. You'll learn more about this in the digital video courses, but that extreme close-up is a totally different emotion, right? And it reveals different information. This is actually could fit into the visual metaphor category as well, because the message is danger is just a matter of distance. Keep your safe distance from the vehicle ahead. We don't see any cars or any kind of vehicle, but it's the idea. It's representing the idea through metaphor. The danger of the dog bite, but there's no danger once you pull back. Let's talk about some of those elements here. What are some of the elements that you see used in this case? Or storytelling techniques, humor and suspense. Okay, yeah, there's probably quite a few of them mixed into this one. Definitely humor, and the suspense. And we all have experienced the unpleasant visit to the dentist. And that's sort of an unpleasant sort of fear, and then comparing that to the fear you feel in a roller coaster or one of those free fall rides where you're afraid, but you're enjoying it at the same time because deep down you're safe, hopefully, and you've chosen to put yourself in that situation. So it's using that visual metaphor as well. Okay, what about this one? What are your observations on this one as far as who's the protagonist, first of all, and what's the story? What's the story problem? I don't know if you'd call it a problem in this case, but this scenario. Okay, Kenneth says the viewer is the protagonist. And I don't know if I would say the viewer is the protagonist or if the mechanics themselves are the protagonists in this case. They're in this situation where it's the idea here is that they're using this waste oil heater to warm this garage. And you can kind of see where it looks pretty frosty out the window, but they're in their shorts like a day at the beach. So I would probably put the mechanics in the role of the protagonist, particularly this one that's featured in the foreground, with the story problem being there's facing this cold garage and the pleasant environment that's created using the product, right? And it uses humor. It uses a little bit of visual metaphor with the comparison to the beach as well. And what are your reactions to this example? This is not from the exploration, but one I've saved from a while back. Yeah, the topic is child labor, and particularly in the garment industry. And describe how the designer has really made this more impactful through their use of imagery or story. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. The children are behind the creation of the product, and in this case, literally hidden behind the product as sort of a screen that they're trying to hide it. It's sort of that ignore that child behind the curtain idea, right? Um, and there's that element of surprise when you look at this, and then you suddenly realize there's little eyes peering out from behind there. It's startling, and there's more. If you notice over here, there's more than one child back there. It's startling and can be upsetting. It plays with that sense of empathy, um, and it wants you to look closer. It wants you to think about this. It's using that emotion to make you think about this, right? This topic. So, um, using our sense of empathy to make us care about this issue. And it's that idea of the intellectual challenge. You see this, and what's the first thing you notice is either going to be this bold headline or the image of the father and his son. And this doesn't make sense, right? You see this. Why would you wish your son had cancer? It's an intellectual challenge. It is an absurd statement until you get into the story. And this is actually a literal story. They've included um, the details, a little more detail than you typically would with a visual story, but you realize, oh, okay, this child has such a rare condition that there's never been any research or funding, that it would almost be better if he had cancer because at least there would be a treatment. Um, but just seeing that statement, yeah, it does evoke emotion, but it makes you kind of take a double take because like what? Why would anyone wish that? So using that the unexpected to evoke that sense of surprise. Shock and all. Yeah, it is shocking. It definitely, even the imagery itself is evokes emotion. Is the look on the face, the troubled child, and just the overall body language. It communicates to us. And I want to reiterate that not all images are stories. Of course, I could say the same. By extension, not all stories have images, but we're in the topic of visual storytelling. This is an image, and this is a visual metaphor. It's farm to table. You have a pitchfork with a silverware handle. There's definitely a metaphor, but there's not really a lot of story. We can imply some things that, well, there must be a farm, there must be somebody serving this food, but we don't have a story. So in order to have a story, you not only need compelling imagery, but a story problem and a protagonist. So even if you have visual metaphor, that's not a guarantee. So when you do your Photoshop practice Thursday night and start planning your mood board, think about how you can incorporate story elements, not just compelling imagery. This was another really neat one from the exploration, and this is almost entirely metaphor. So what's going on here? And I'll give you a minute to examine this one, because this one does take some exploration to really get. And it is an ad for tires. That's kind of the giveaway, but yeah, okay. And this was Brian's example, and yeah, it's protected on all four sides. But with that in mind, if this is an ad for tires, then the shields are placed in the positions where we would expect tires to be if there was a vehicle parked there. Their slogan or their logo is to protect and serve, or to serve and protect. And so then that's represented in the visual metaphor of the armored knights protecting. They're kind of in these poses, these protective poses with their shields placed, and so it represents the wheels serving a protective purpose. Really interesting imagery, and does take some interpretation. Yeah, very much. That's a pure visual metaphor for sure. This one is as well, with the comparison of bullets or cigarettes to bullets, and you see the crime scene that we're familiar with from TV, hopefully hopefully more so than real life. And the evidence markers where we would see bullet casings, but there's cigarettes instead in an ashtray. And I think probably in this case, we are perhaps the protagonist as sort of an investigator coming upon this scene. Although there could be argued that the victim himself is the protagonist. If you look at the wording of the message, the bullet can kill you in less than a second. When it hits you, cigarette does the same, only slower. So he's the one that's been victim to this problem. And it's another really compelling visual metaphor. Visual metaphor is really a powerful tool for conveying complex ideas in very, not simple, but very compact and easily conveyed manner. And this could be a religious persecution. That's actually the national flag of Morocco. And it's covering up this person hanging by their hands. And then when you look at the message, it's Moroccan government covers up cases of torture. So it's pretty shocking. We have the body, but it's literally covered by the government, the symbol of the government. Yeah, it does somewhat resemble the Star of David as well. But yeah, this is more of a political statement, or sort of political prisoners, or presented by Amnesty International. The message is to stop torture in general, but this was focused on a particular nation. But the flags are very strong symbols representing the particular country. In our own country, the American flag has a lot of meaning, from a patriotic standpoint. And the shocking impression of seeing flag burnings or someone desecrating the flag, it carries a lot of emotion, a lot of meaning and symbolism. So when you have it represented in this way, you know that this is not only representing just a literal flag or piece of cloth put over this victim, but the government, the entity, the entire entity of that country. So much deeper meaning than the imagery alone. All right, are there any thoughts, any questions or comments about any of the topics of visual storytelling? Okay. All right, then the next step will be for you to try it yourself. And we're going to start off very basic with Photoshop. I know that most likely most of the class has never touched Photoshop, and that's the mindset that I have taken in designing the class. You're going to use the Photoshop CS6 lesson in Lynda to explore the basic techniques. I know you're not using CS6. You're probably using Creative Cloud 2015, but these techniques work exactly the same in both versions. And it comes with practice files as well. So work with the practice files. If you have time, work through the practice files that come with the lesson, and then do the practices, the practice assignment. These practice assignments are meant to be follow-ups, a follow-up to the Lynda lessons themselves. So they use the same techniques in a different way. So it's intended to give you a little bit extra practice with the software and to practice the storytelling techniques. And Grace, you mentioned you weren't able to use the 3D format for the assignment. Is that some of the 3D modeling techniques? I know they've started adding in some 3D transforms and so forth. And yeah, that really doesn't play a part in this assignment. I don't want to limit your ability to explore and practice with those techniques. So if you can find a way to make that work, and still meet the requirements of the assignment, I don't mind you doing that. What I want you to avoid, though, is using too complex transformations and things where it becomes too busy. So really, think of how clearly you're communicating your message as well. But other than that, I don't mind you going beyond what the assignment calls for. If you have experience with Photoshop, try to look for ways to challenge yourself, as long as those basic requirements are met. Yeah, definitely don't go crazy, but with the techniques. But if you want to go beyond what's required, please, by all means. And I do see that sometimes, some of my students who have some design experience will turn these practice activities into full-blown designs in their own right and make some beautiful things. And I'm not opposed to that. But at the same time, I'm not expecting anybody in this class to be a graphic artist. So don't feel that kind of pressure. All right. Well, that is what I had prepared for you tonight, and I do appreciate you bearing with me through this hour. If you guys feel like you're all set and have a good idea of what's going on, then I'm happy to let you go for the evening. But if you do have any questions, then I would also be happy to address those now. I can give you some pointers on logo creation. Um, I could also point you to some of the graphic design teachers in the program as well who would be a little more knowledgeable in that, but I can certainly give you my input. That actually is part of the graphic design for communication course. You'll be doing some logo creation and branding, and creating branded content like letterhead and business cards. And I believe you do get into Illustrator in that course.